If you're a boxing fan and never want to miss a fight, Boxing Showtimes is the app you need. This is a professional boxing schedule in your pocket that keeps you up to date on what's going on in the world of boxing. Download now.
Our WBC President Mauricio Sullivan said here on Sky Sports the other day, he uses the word if. If, as I say here all the time, if in the world of boxing is a very, very big word indeed. Yeah, there's always an if. He says if it happens in 2024, Joshua versus Wilder will likely be a WBC final eliminator to determine the mandatory challenger for Fury versus Usyk. This was what WBC President Mauricio Sullivan said. Now, following on from that, Eddie Hearn gave an interview with Boxing Social where I'm going to quote him here directly. He says that he now believes it's very likely Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder will get made. He said if AJ beats Otto Wallin and Wilder beats Parker on December the 23rd in Saudi Arabia, that is the fight, the biggest fight, actually that fight is the biggest fight in boxing. Well, I still believe Fury versus Usyk is, for me, a much bigger fight. And that's the fight I'm more keen on, to be honest with you. But Joshua versus Wilder, you know, in terms of the fights that aren't made yet for 2024, I would say that's probably, well, actually, no, that is on the top of the list, I would say. In terms of the fights that aren't made yet for next year, that's got to be on the top of the list. I hope this fight gets made. And the things that worry me a little bit, as I've said in several videos, there's two main things that worry me, right, about this fight, right, not getting made. The first off is that AJ has, well, Team AJ apparently have looked at Otto Wallin as an opponent. Why have they looked at him as an opponent? Because obviously if you look at Otto Wallin, he's really not, like, you could not get a more polar opposite to what you would get in terms of facing Deontay Wilder than you would facing Otto Wallin. With Parker, at least he's orthodox. It's not the same dimensions as Joshua. He will move a little bit, like he can be a bit of a mover, so maybe you could say, well, at least, you know, it gives Wilder a chance to, you know, try and cut the ring off a bit and stuff like that. But primarily neither guy is really fighting someone you would expect the opponent that, you know, if they're going to fight each other, they're not using ideal prep in terms of the opponents. I'll put it like that. The worry I have is the fact that Joshua is fighting Wallin. He'll usurp him in the rankings, which would mean that he then has the option, if the IBF title gets vacant by the winner of Fury Usyk, you know, that's if a rematch happens immediately, which it may very well do, it may not. If that's not the case, then, you know, well, Hrgovic just gets his crack. But if it gets vacant, that puts Joshua, if he wins, in a position to fight for the vacant title, which, you know, Eddie Hearn has been talking about that in the past. And I worry is that, like, if it's Wilder next, why is there options? You know, because to me, that Otto Wallin fight is pretty much, you know, beat him, you're number 2 in the rankings, it gives you an option. But if you're fighting Wilder next, why do you have options? You know, Deontay Wilder, from what we know of, there's no options. It's just Joshua. All right, that's a worry. The second worry is that I know some people, you know, and it's weird. Some people are like, well, this card is garbage. They're all in mismatches. Blah, 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 blah. They're all in mismatches. Yeah, they're all No, they're not all in mismatches. There is some mismatches, yeah, definitely. Demori versus Hrgovic is one of them. You know, Elazara versus Jay Opataya is another. They're mismatches. And, you know, I'm fine with people saying that. But Joshua versus Wallin and Parker versus Wilder are not mismatches. They're very competitive fights. And they're fights that I worry about because I've said it once on here and I'll say it again. The last few times, certainly in recent history, where we've had these big fights talked about and potentially teased, they've been delayed. Why? Because one of the guys has lost. And it's just come kind of, well, AJ Usyk, many of us felt Usyk was you know, had a good chance to win that fight. I don't think many of us felt Ruiz had a good chance to win. And that was during a time where they were talking about doing the Wilder versus Joshua fight, you know, 2019. The guys fought, it was Wilder versus Brazil. I think that was in June. That was in May, and then it was early June. It was going to be Joshua versus Andy Ruiz, and then it was finished off by Fury versus Schwartz in the middle of June, thereabouts. And I remember at the time saying, one of them may take an L. I know that they seem fairly run-of-the-mill, but one of them may take an L. Joshua took an L. You fast forward in 2021, talk of Fury Joshua. Fury made that video saying, oh, it's going to happen, then the arbitration ruled in Wilder's favour. Ultimately, they had to get through their respective fights. Fury Wilder, Joshua had to fight his mandatory and Alexander Usyk. It was a case of, right, they're fighting fairly close. Joshua first, a fortnight later it's Fury. What will happen? Who's going to win? You know, that's what we were thinking. And, well, you know, Obviously, I remember at the time saying, it wouldn't surprise me if one of them loses. Joshua lost. I wonder, I'm not saying it's going to necessarily happen again. I think both guys should get through it, but you just don't know. They're in competitive fights, so that's a worry. In terms of them fighting for the WBC final eliminator next year, well, if they'd done it this year, based upon what both guys have done, Joshua fighting Hellenius and fighting Franklin, I would have said, no, they shouldn't be, in a final eliminator, and certainly Wilder shouldn't. I think the fact that they are beating top 10 heavyweights, it kind of makes it a little bit more, okay, fair enough. Because if you'd got an eliminator, say this year, say it was ordered this year, just based upon Joshua again beating Franklin and beating Hellenius and Wilder, not even fighting, just beating Hellenius, I would have said, nah. But with this, I can kind of say, okay, fair enough. But they should order it. They really should order it. Instead of just saying it will likely be, if you're going to do it, just order it. At least that way, it's a real case of, right, you're not obliged to go through with it, but, you think it would add a bit more pressure. And that's what I think there. So, look, I want to see Joshua versus Wilder next year. That fight, out of the fights that aren't yet made, because my priority is Usyk Fury. That's simple as. That's the one I want. February 17 can't come quick enough. But in terms of some of the other fights that haven't been made, that were being talked about, I want to say Joshua versus Wilder, Canelo versus Benavidez, obviously. And then you're kind of looking and you're thinking, what else could come about? What else could be made? I would quite like to see, maybe a Devin Haney versus a Shakur, although that might be the best fight in the world. I'd also quite like to see Teofimo versus Devin. I'd actually, one of the fights that I know some people are going to be like, gee, really? I'd be like, yeah, I'd love to see this. I'd love to see Haney versus Subriel Mateus. I think that fight could be real entertaining. I think that could be a great fight. In terms of welterweight fights, Boots Ennis versus Crawford. In fact, that would probably be... I might even put that one ahead of Canelo versus Benavidez, honestly. I'd have Wilder versus Joshua number 1 and maybe Boots versus Crawford number 2. Seriously, because that's how good I think that fight could be. And you're talking about two of the best. Two of the best. So that's my thoughts on that. Let me know yours. We could get into a whole nother video about fights you want to see next year. We could do that's a whole nother video. We could talk about that. But for now, we'll focus on the present. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comment section below. Look, we all want to see Wilder versus Joshua next year. And I think that we need to keep bringing it up and mentioning it, that no, this is the fight we want to see. This is the fight the fans want to see. This is the fight we all want to see. We want to see Joshua Wilder next year. It's not announced, but let's get it announced. Let's both guys get through their respective fights and let's do it next year. Let's hope. Let me know your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed it, people. Smash the like button if you could. Excuse me, hit subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. For now, I will leave you with that. Peace.